There are only a few things in this world that we can take for granted. Death, taxes, and the scope of video games getting larger and larger. While larger games may provide more engaging experiences, they usually spend a longer amount of time in development. I mean, that's why the prices are going up, right? With AAA games taking longer to finish, large developers that have been making games for a long time are now more incentivized than ever to remaster or in some cases even remake their older games. It takes marginally less resources and time and could theoretically make you just as much money. And now, more than ever, there is a giant market of nostalgic gamers ready to relive some of their most cherished gaming memories. The JRPG genre seems to have the largest market for this, mostly because these are narrative-driven experiences. In my opinion, gameplay mechanics grow stale at a much faster rate than a great story. Every time one game gets announced as a remake or remaster, tons of people start filling up the comments with their suggestions on which game should get this kind of treatment next. Hey, remake GoldenEye! Please, it's the best shooter ever! The first-person shooter genre has only gone downhill since GoldenEye. Every game that's ever come out since GoldenEye has been worse. Bring back GoldenEye! And it's usually a matter of time before you see the name of the game we're talking about today, Skies of Arcadia, a JRPG created by Overworks, which is an internal team at Sega, was originally released on the Dreamcast in the year 2000. While the heyday for JRPGs was during the PlayStation 1 era, the Dreamcast had its fair share of great JRPGs as well. Skies of Arcadia has that classic get all the blank stones from every corner of the planet to save the world thing going. It's as bread and butter as a JRPG can get, but is it still worth your time nearly 22 years after its release? My name is PoopBro420, and today I've made it my mission to answer this question as objectively as possible. Full disclosure, I have a large amount of nostalgia for this game. I was one of the rare kids who actually got a Dreamcast Christmas 1999 because I was cute and spoiled. I had been a big fan of JRPGs since the PlayStation 1, so initially there was not a lot of JRPGs for me to play. Nearly a year after the Dreamcast came out, Skies of Arcadia was released in October 2000. The game reviewed well, and I remember liking it so much as a kid. I had played games like Grandia 2 and Evolution before this, and I don't know if this is my nostalgia talking, but I've always really loved that 5th generation 3D look that the Dreamcast games had, especially the games that went for that anime aesthetic. While the PS1 introduced 3D, most of its games didn't do much for facial expressions, and I think that was something that helped Skies of Arcadia stand out at the time. 2 years later, the game was remastered with some quality of life updates on the GameCube the day after Christmas 2002 as Skies of Arcadia Legends. This version of the game added a few things that I'll get into later, but first, what is Skies of Arcadia? It's a turn-based JRPG set in a unique world called Arcadia, where most of the continents have been destroyed. People get around using airships because there's only a few floating islands left and no water. They just float in the sky.
But Poops, wouldn't that make this outer space that they're flying through instead of a planet?
In real life, yes. Also, shut up please. You take the role of a young air pirate named Vice. He was born into the business, being the son of a pirate. But not just any kind of pirate. Vice and his family are blue rogues, which means that they only attack the mean government ships that can defend themselves, and do nice things like helping the poor. When the game begins, a mysterious young girl is fleeing from one of those mean government ships that can defend themselves that I was talking about. Vice and his childhood friend that he likes to spy on when she's changing, who's named Aika, board the government ship to save the mysterious girl. The girl is saved, She explains that her name is Fina, and she's on a secret mission from the moon to find the 5 moon crystals before the mean government people do. You see, the government has found out that each of these 5 moon crystals is linked to a giant monster that will serve the will of whoever is holding its corresponding moon crystal. That's right, the government wants to use this ancient power to take over the world, and now they have even joined forces with the Sephiroth look-alike, whose name I shudder at the thought to even say, Ramirez. He's also from the moon, and he always has this "I'm going to be the final boss" look on his face. As you make your way around the world, scooping up moon crystals, you'll make tons of friends and enemies while making a name for yourself. Literally. The game has a rank for Vice based on the dialogue choices you make, how often you run from fights, and how many optional activities you get into. My favorite way to get my pirate rank up was doing the bounty hunting. These are optional boss fights that were only available in the GameCube version. But your rank changes from other things like being very rich and progressing in the story. Other than a few optional things here and there, getting your rank up is nothing more than for making you feel better about yourself. But who doesn't like being called Vice the Dashing every time you sleep at an inn? The game takes place during an age of discovery. Most of the world is cut off from each other, so there are tons of discoveries waiting to be made. Ancient statues, crashed ships from the old world, and even strange spinning lights in the sky, similar to Aurora Borealis, make up some of the over 80 optional discoveries you can find. Every time you find these unique landmarks, information about the location can be sold for money. This is how the game rewards exploration. Also, the sound effect for making discoveries has been burned into my memory for better or for worse.
Jesse! Wake up! Wake up! Where is it? Where'd you hide the map?
The mean government people I was talking about earlier are the government of Valua. They seem to be the most powerful country in the world, with a strong military that has started aggressively finding ways to get their hands on these moon crystals. The game starts at an amazing pace. Once you rescue Fina, Vice and Ica run off to do some resource gathering. When they return, they see that their hideout has been attacked by Valua. No one died, but all of Vice's friends and family, including Fina, have been captured, and they're gonna execute them all if nothing is done. Vice and Ica make their way to Sailor's Island to find someone who can take them to Valua. This is when you meet my favorite character in the game, Drachma. Drachma is an old, angry pirate who only has one reason for living anymore: hunting down some giant whale. In fact, when you first meet him, he saves you from said giant whale only to get mad at you for ruining his chance at killing it. To make this up to him, he puts your ass to work. In exchange, he'll take you to Valua. There's also a certain harpoon cannon he's interested in buying there, but I'm sure that doesn't have anything to do with it. As you spend time with him, it's obvious this gruff old man slowly grows a liking to Vice and Ica, even going as far as to save them more than a couple more times throughout the story. Also, you wouldn't expect it, but he has two of the most heartfelt moments in the entire game that still, to this very day, bring a small tear to my manly eye. I'm going to share those moments now. If you're interested in finding out these moments yourself going in blind, then skip to avoid. Alright, so Drachma isn't just hunting this whale for no real reason. He's on a path of revenge. But he absolutely does not like talking about it. One late night on his ship, the Little Jack, Vice has trouble sleeping, so he walks out onto the deck of the bridge. Drachma's there holding a small box. As Vice approaches, he can tell Drachma is in a different mood than he's normally in. He opens up the box to reveal a large number of different colored feathers. Drachma explains that his son, who Weiss reminds him of, loved to collect these feathers. Unfortunately, Drachma's son died at sea one day to the giant whale named Rochnum. At this moment, Rochnum appears. Drachma snaps out of this nice moment with Weiss and fires the harpoon cannon. As it digs into the whale, Valua starts attacking the little Jack. You board the escape rafts, but Drachma stays on the ship, still being dragged away by Rochnum. Much later in the game, you're reunited with Drachma. He's stuck in the cave that Rochnum lives in, but this is because Rochnum saved his life from the Valuan assault. Drachma explains how he's not only forgiven Rochnum, but Rochnum is now dying because of the harpoon strike, and he doesn't want the whale to die alone, just like Drachma knows he probably will someday. Rochnum lets out a moan and a tear as Drachma comforts the whale in his final moments. For as little dialogue this game has, Drachma has a remarkable amount of character development during Skies of Arcadia's story. It also doesn't hurt that he's really good in fights. Combat in the game is turn-based, as I said before. Fights take place on foot, or sometimes even between two airships. The party all shares a spirit gauge that can be used to unleash your most devastating special attacks, which Weiss and his friends can perform for seemingly no reason. I found most battles very easy because items are so good and so cheap. I've also played this game many times in the past, so it might be a little hard for me to gauge how difficult the game actually is. Every so often, you'll be brought into climactic airship battles. They're pretty rare and feel more like puzzles than battles sometimes. During airship combat, your crew will ask you what to do. Should we get in close? Keep our distance? Shit and come? It's all up to you, and your actions will either open up your enemy to a huge attack or vice versa. Skies of Arcadia is as bread and butter as a turn-based RPG can get. I think that's its greatest strength as well as its greatest weakness. But is it still worth your time? Well, maybe not. The turn-based genre is in kind of a limbo these days. Almost every game that is turn-based needs to utilize some kind of extra layer to survive in the current market. Maybe it's a stun gauge, a timing-based input for extra damage, or maybe even two different types of damage you have to do in order to use a damage multiplier that only works when you are airborne. The point is, I don't think you can make these kinds of games anymore. They're simply too niche, making the profitability not there. Growing up, Skies of Arcadia was one of my absolute favorites, but now I'm starting to understand why Sega left our favorite blue rogues in the dark. In 2019, Skies of Arcadia producer Riko Kodama and director Shintaro Tanaka were brought on to an interview for IGN Japan. One of the first things Tanaka said that let me know how likely it is we're ever going to get anything new for Skies of Arcadia was this.
ね、僕と児玉さんも最初にお話に出た時正直なんでアルカディアに、呼んでくださるんだろうって本当にって思ったわけですよ。
だって名作ですからね。
When Skies moved from the Dreamcast to the GameCube, quality of life improvements were made, like reducing the encounter rate and giving more experience points for each encounter. If they were to remaster it or remake it or whatever, I think so many things would have to be changed that it would just become so far removed from what it is that it might be better off becoming its own thing. Maybe Skies of Arcadia is better off being remembered than brought back. The fun and spectacle of the combat starts to wear out its welcome around 30 hours into a 50-something hour game. A wonderful story grows stale at a slower rate than gameplay, but the wonderful story segments eventually become too few and far between. And airship battles in the second half of the game are why I highly recommend anyone who wants to play this game to play it on Dolphin. You can speed up your gameplay with the tab button at default settings. Skies of Arcadia is not a bad game. It used to be an amazing game, but now it's a sign of its time. A perfect time capsule that fans who were there will always remember fondly. Even if I don't believe that it survives the scrutiny of today's gamer, it's an amazing package that had so much crammed into it for the time, and things that I didn't even get into, like recruiting new crew members to improve your ship Suikoden in style, or the pirate headquarters you get to customize yourself later in the game. If you think you'd like this game, chances are you're right. If not, leave this one in the past. But pay respect to it for what it is, the greatest RPG to ever come to the Dreamcast. Thanks for watching.